Hello again, and thank you for joining us once again today. Today we're going to cover something a little bit different, considering the nature of what we usually put on our channel. This has no, and I want to underline, no gameplay whatsoever. So if you're interested in that, you should probably stop watching now and go watch some of our other videos. What this is we're going to talk about configuring controls for IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad. The reason why is that with the current sales going on, a lot of our members are picking us up for the first time. And considering coming from Claude, the UI and interface and controls can be a little confusing if you're just looking at it for the first time. So I'm going to go through what I have, looking at the menus in game step by step, and we're going to see what I have, and then from there you can make an informed decision on how to set up your controls. And hopefully this will be of some use, and thanks for joining us today. Alright, so here we have the main menu of the game. So we'll just start from here and we'll go through the things that I think that you need to pay attention to. The primary problem that I see with people that set up their controls is when they first start is, well, two things. First off, they set them up to be side dependent, so therefore they find later on that when they set them up that they don't work for the other side. For instance, they've set them up for German. This is the most common thing because you need LS controls for German, and then later on they find that they have to rebind a bunch of stuff in order to get Russian to actually work with German. So ideally you should, the number one thing you want to do, of course, when you're setting something up is you want to set it up, and leave it alone, and then you want to never think about it again, other than remembering where potentially some of the things that are set up. That's the second thing, is a lot of times people actually set something up and then forget it. Hopefully we'll give some tips on potentially how to remember that until you start picking that stuff up. We'll also cover a couple of things that are not super known and might also be helpful. So the first thing, of course, is that we want to go into our settings here. And then actually what we want to do is we want to go into camera, of all things. Now this is pretty much standard, but this right here, cinematic. Okay. What people don't realize is that this actually does not one, but two things. The first thing that it does is it turns off your ability to control your camera in cinematic mode so that you can just move it everywhere from the external views. Now, why would you want to uncheck that? Because of the second function. Most people in this game have found out that motion blur drives them nuts, and this controls also motion blur. So if you don't like motion blur, and it also bleeds FPS, unclick it. And then while you might have a little less functionality when you're looking at your track recordings, you'll have potentially more frames, and you won't have the motion blur that is potentially causing you to lose targets and ground clutter anymore. So we'll get into that's all that you need to know about that. Now, key mapping. All right. So these are all your things. Service menu is just a couple of various things. Basically, the most important thing in here is like your chat counter and showing your hide mission briefing. Now, what this is here is actually O. This are all default, by the way. I haven't changed them, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you do either. Is that this actually means the in-game map under full real servers. So just keep that in mind. Other than that, it's pretty much not anything you really need to pay attention to. Camera controls. Now, you can see here that it's basically saying if you move your mouse that it's going to start moving your camera. And so the first thing you're thinking, at least when I remember when I first got this game, was, well, what I want to do here is I want to get rid of all this stuff because I have track IR. So every time I touch my mouse, something's going to happen where it's going to start screwing around with my track IR. And I did. And then I promptly regretted it because, well, it doesn't say this in here. It also controls your ability to move your turret around with a mouse. So if you get rid of the bindings that are in here, you promptly will lose your ability to control your turret. I don't particularly like the way this is set up, but that's the way that it is. So my recommendation for you is just to leave all this stuff alone. You don't really need to touch any of it. You probably won't have to think about it. Just main thing is that if, don't touch your mouse necessarily while you're flying. unless you're in a gunner seat. We'll go over here, pilot head control. This is just zoom in, zoom out, and other things along those lines, which is actually the only important thing that I would say here. Now, these key bindings, I use a CH HOTAS setup. I have a fighter stick USB and Pro Throttle USB. I find these as an excellent stick. It's a little bit more expensive, of course, than what most people are probably going to have. The main thing, the reason why this is important is because I have a lot of buttons. Now, when I say you probably want to have this bound, that doesn't necessarily mean you want to use the same bindings you have. As a matter of fact, I guarantee you don't want to have the same bindings that I have under most circumstances. But what you want to do here is you want to actually have or know the control for whatever this is. It doesn't even necessarily have to be on your stick, but you just have to this is something you need to have set and you need to be able to remember. So obviously zoom in and zoom out is the important thing. And there are pretty much none others that are in here that are that important if you have track IR, because this is obviously controlling where you're looking at stuff, which obviously if you have track IR, it's going to be doing that for you. Or for that matter, any other method of head tracking. There are several other methods that are far less expensive that you can get. If you can't afford track IR, then that would be worth looking into. Now we get into some of the more important stuff here. You want to have main controls, obviously. If you can't control the motion of your aircraft, then why are you here? And here we get into something here. Now, this is important. For whatever reason, the way that the designers of the game have set it up is that certain aircraft use different systems to accomplish the exact same thing. So, for instance, what you're looking at here is you have an adjustable stabilizer axis. This is the kind of thing you see on 109s. Then you have trim, which, while it doesn't move the entire tailplane like you would have on a stabilizer, that's why it's a stabilizer, not a trim tab, it functions identically. As you can see here from the fact that we have a stabilizer axis, but we also have pitch trim and up and down, these do functionally the same things, but they can be bound to different things. All right. Now, unless you've got a crap load of buttons, which I fortunately do kind of have a crap load of buttons, but even I don't have enough buttons to bind like several different kinds of control types of configurations to different controls. The way that I find the most efficient way to handle this sort of situation is for everything that does the same, and again, you don't have to do it this way, this is the way that I find most efficient, is for everything that does the same thing, you want to bind it to the exact same control. So for instance here, we have a stabilizer axis. So that's up and down, that's I have that set to a hat switch. Then down here, for pitch up and down, I have it bound the exact same hat switch. And then if you go down even farther, you'll see that there is actually a stabilizer up and down for just the FW190. And I have that bound to the same thing. So you may have to set the same control to the same thing, or the same type of control to the same thing, excuse me, multiple times. So just keep that in mind. But these are the things that you actually probably want to pay attention to. You want to have your stabilizer set so you can control 109s. You want to have, obviously, yaw trim set. You want to have pitch trim. This is so obviously you can avoid bleeding speed by keeping your aircraft in some sort of terrain condition. You want to have your pitch trim set. I personally do not have roll trim. Some aircraft have roll trim. It's not super common. I've just run out of buttons and I've decided that it's not really worth it. But if you actually have more buttons than I do, or if you actually want it, I would bind it to something that you can remember. There's a reset trimmers button. A lot of people use this. I find this to be not super helpful, but maybe you might want to have it. But that's what that's for. We have, of course, then the FW previously mentioned 190 stabilizer. You want to set your flaps up and down to something so that you can control your flaps. Air brakes, you want to set that so that you can control the air brakes on your JU-87, your PE-2, and your JU-88, which are the three aircraft that have that. Your attack siren, I don't have that set. That's something that's set for JU-87s. I find this to be, well, maybe you like the noise. I don't. And it takes away speed from your plane. Even though it's not a lot, you don't have a lot to start with anyway. You have gear up and down mapped, obviously. Tail wheel lock unlock. This is important. A lot of aircraft have a tail wheel lock, 190s, yaks, things like that, and you'll find it potentially extremely difficult to taxi or take off an aircraft at low speed without your tail wheel in a locked position on those aircraft. It is possible, but it's just a hell of a lot simpler if you actually lock your tail wheel. Your wheel brakes, I have these set right here. These are on my rudder pedals. There is a kind of an issue basically where it doesn't particularly like to have it set so that you can do you can do the Russian style and German style at the same time. I've just done it this way. It works for me. It does allow you to turn and get control of your plane. So you can do it this way, or you can use three keys on your keyboard or whatever. But you're going to want to have these set so you can have your brakes set. Parking brakes on and off. This is not a major thing, but on both the P51 and also, excuse me, P51, P40, excuse me, and also the JU52, you do have parking brakes. So you probably want to have those set so that you can take that off, because otherwise you'll be rolling across the ground wondering why you have to use so much engine thrust to get the aircraft moving. Canopy open and close, obviously this is an important thing. You don't want to take off in a 109 with your canopy open, because then you won't have one very long. Same thing with an MC202. So this is useful for that. And landing lights on and off. This is useful if you're trying to land in the dark, or sometimes trying to strafe ground targets when it's nearly dark. Navigation lights on or off. Now this is actually one of the more important ones, because there's really nothing to do with navigation. It has a lot to do with actually signaling to people in your formation if you get separated from them, so they can easily find you. Or if they can't see you when you're getting jumped, you can turn on your lights. That makes it easier to spot, and it makes it easier for them to come find you and help you out. So, and also when you're on the ground, it makes it so that people are a little less prone to run you over because they can see you a little bit better. Cockpit lights on and off. This can be very helpful if you're flying on a map that's in dusk or near dawn, or slightly before dawn. You can see your instruments a little easier. And there is one for formation lights. Now, I don't have this set. I probably should get this set, actually. But this is only relevant for one aircraft. The Spitfire actually has a formation lights. So you can set that or not set that, your choice. Then for the rest of the actions, they're just keyboards settings that I have actually set. Of which, as far as I'm concerned, actually, this is one you'll be using a lot, unfortunately, but you know, it's pretty standard, the same as it is in Claude. And this one actually right here is important if you're doing level bombing, but that's for a different video at a different time. Okay, then we'll go over to our engine controls. Obviously, you want to have your throttle bound to something. You want to have your RPM controls set, okay? That's your pitch. It doesn't say that, but you're basically, well, actually, technically, you are, well, precisely you are actually controlling your RPM control, because you have constant speed propellers in all the aircraft in the game, except for the JU52. So what you're actually doing is commanding an RPM, and it's automatically setting the pitch to accomplish that. So that's what this is right here. Mixture control, you need to have this set, because Russian aircraft do not actually have automatic mixtures in many cases. The IL-2 does, the MiG does, there's a few other instances as well, but for the most part you have to manage that, so that's something you need to have set. You need to have your mode for your supercharger set, because again, most Russian aircraft do not have, none of them are automatic, and most of them have a high and low gear. Some of them only have one, actually, like the MiG, for instance. It's basically set up to use only high gear only. Engine boost, you need to have this as well. This is needed for the LA-5, also for the HS-129 and the MC-202. There might be a few others that I'm forgetting right off the top of my head, but you're going to want to be able to have some way that you know to engage that. Then from there, we have This right here, high pitch and low pitch, this may be a little confusing right here, okay? This, again, is going back to the same thing we have here, RPM control. It doesn't actually say this right here, but this is used on the PE2 Series 35. The PE2 Series 35 uses a completely different mechanism. It uses an electric mechanism versus a hydraulic mechanism as all the other aircraft. And this is actually how you control the RPM on the PE2 Series 35. So again, I have just bound this to the same setting as my RPM control here. So you'll want to have that set if you have that aircraft. Then we get down to here, water radiators. So I have this set at for your 109, 110 water radiators. You're going to see this water radiators referenced over and over again. It's, again, the same control I just set for all of them. Then you have oil radiators. You're going to want to have something set for oil radiators. So the biggest annoying thing about Boss compared to Claude is because since you don't have click bits, you do need to actually set a lot more controls, or have a lot more controls, because everything has to be either on your stick or on your keyboard in order for you to control it. You just can't click on it. So it makes it a little bit more difficult in the UI department than Claude does. As well, so we'll just go through this. Like I said, so water and oil radiators, you need to have those set. Now we get down here to cowl shutters. This is for radial engines. You need to have these set as well to something. Again, as you can see, I have this set to hat switches on my stick, but you would need to set this to something. You know, it doesn't even need to be on your stick. It can be on your keyboard as long as you can get to it easily and you can control it easily. Then that's fine. But you do need to be able to remember what it is. Now, so you need to have that set. So for your, because inlets are cowl shutters on all three of these aircraft, and you have outlet control at cowl shutters on all three of these aircraft. By the way, going back up to here earlier, where we're talking about water radiators and oil radiators, some people I've seen on the forums they've decided that to save buttons or things they need to remember when they first start off, they bind the oil and the water radiators to the same control, so when you open one, you open the other one. I personally don't recommend that because you'll be taking away the ability for you to maximize your performance. So, because what you'll find generally is you don't need the oil radiator open as far as the oil radiator. So, by making them the same, you can add more drag to your aircraft that you would not necessarily need. Alright, so all those, and then the rest of these, for the most part, these are all going to be used as the same as defaults. The number one thing here is these numbers right here, 0, 1, 2, and 3. These are for controlling engines. So for instance, if you have to actually go and control an engine by itself, for instance, you started up a 110 on the ground and you had your throttle off of the 0 position, and when it finished starting up the first engine, you had it at 30% and it started whipping your aircraft around in circles, and now your one engine reads like 30% when you advance the throttles and the other reads 10. The way to do that is to select each individually and then drop the throttle back to 0 to equalize the pressure, the throttle positions on both of those. That'll fix that problem for you. So for all that's how you do that. Or if you potentially need to feather a prop, which I don't see that in here right now. Right here it is. That you're going to want to have that set. This is not a normal keybind. I've changed this one. This one right here, you also, let's mention that as well. You want to have a key binding set that you can find quickly to change it from on an aircraft that has automatic control to manual control. Specifically on 109s, this is what this is going to do. Is this mainly 109s? Is this will disable the automatic engine control and put it into manual. Why would you want to do this? The easiest question is that the automatic engine control is designed for performance and not to maximize engine life. Well, why would you care about that? If you've taken multiple hits in your engine, it's black smoking. You immediately want to engage this if you can. Obviously, if some guy's trying to rip your guts out, it's a little difficult right at that point. But the idea is to reduce your RPM down less than 1500 and reduce it to 0.8 ATA. This will allow you to fly with a damaged engine on a 109 for a considerable period of time. It should be frequently long enough for you to actually fly back to your airbase and land. That's another tip right there that I may expound more on later. So just keep that in mind. That's why you want to have that bound. Other than that, it's pretty much all the standard stuff that you would find in here. Then we get into weapons controls, obviously, things that you want to have. You want to have your things so that you want to press buttons that the things shoot. I have on here also your bomb sight is also set up on my stick. Whether you actually want to have that or you just want to have set to V is up to you. I have things for dropping the bombs, the mode, and the delay toggle, and some other things. You may or may not want that. Now, the thing here that you probably want to have is obviously you want to have your drop bombs and or drop paratroopers, basically drop things. I also recommend if you've got a button that you can devote to it, setting something up for your launching rockets. For right here, I've got also a button for controlling how many rockets fire when that happens. Bomb bays, etc., etc. These are all fairly standard things that you have right here. So that's for the most part. Oh, and then down here at the bottom you have things for setting up your turret if you wanted to do that on your mouse. This is how I have it set. I have a mouse with like 8 buttons on it, so you might not have all these. And again, you might not like some of these keybinds that I'm using. I would recommend that you use something that you personally enjoy instead of what I would use. Other than that, that is pretty much it, actually. These are the ones that are important. If you bind or you can remember what these are to the keyboard or your stick and then make use of these, then you should have no problems from that. You shouldn't have to worry about your control configuration after you get it set. The key, though, of course, is remembering what you've bound. Now, this can be a problem. My recommendation for that is if you've got a cell phone, which pretty much everybody does, you can take some photographs of this screen. And then if you're curious later on, because you don't want to ESC out, you can have a tablet or you can have your phone next to you while you're playing. You know, you can dig that out and look at that. Of course, the best way is practice, but you might not have. It'll probably take a little bit of time to get that. If you're already flying Claude, like probably most of the people that would be watching this video right now would be, then my recommendation, of course, would be to set up your whatever configuration you have now as close to as what you're already using, so that you have less transition confusion. But other than that, that's pretty much it. And if you've got any questions or whatever, send me a message or something on the forums, or just grab me on TeamSpeak and ask me about it. Myself and many other people are more than glad to ask a question. We will do that sometimes as well, but we'll answer them as well as much as you have questions. We're glad to do that. So until next time, I'm Kylai. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video that you just saw. If you liked the content you just saw, feel free to subscribe, or leave a comment and let us know what you think. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please feel free to stop again some other time.